Okay, we are ready to build the Giles G-202. I have everything I need here from Twisted Hobbies. I've got the prop, the motor, the ESC. I've got the servos. We've got two 10-gram servos, one 14-gram servo. Aside from the power combo, we have the receiver and my trusty foam tech. Ooh, I love it. So with this model, we're going to be doing the flexi foam. I have never seen the flexi foam before, so I'm really excited to get into that and see how that builds. I don't see a manual, so I went off and I printed a manual. It is rather sparse. It's a 6-page manual, but I think we're going to be able to handle it just fine. Let's get into this build.
First thing I'm going to do is empty out the box and start organizing all my pieces. And I realized that one of my wings is a little bit damaged, so I'm going to have to glue it together a little bit, but that's no big deal at all. So I kind of break it up into the parts I know I'm going to be using. So I start with my horizontal fuselage and wings, and then I organize all my carbon fiber parts. Next, I would absolutely get some parchment paper to put down because you will have some bleed through with your CA that will go to the other side. So it's really important that we're not having that glue our model to the table. My wing on the left side here is a little damaged during shipping, so I'll just use some foam tack and glue it together. It's got 3 little places here that are going to glue together. There's also going to be a spar that goes into there, so that whole area will be glued in a later step in the process. Now we're ready to glue the wings to this small part of the horizontal fuselage. I'm going to hit both sides with some foam tack. I'm going to bring these pieces together and then hold them apart for about a minute and then press them together for a full bond. I'm using this little piece of angle iron to keep everything flat while it's drying. And then I grab another piece of parchment paper and we're going to do the leading edge wing spar. And I'm going to hit this with CA. On this build, I used a lot of CA and kicker. First thing we do here is just give it a dry fit. I did have to trim it a bit. And then I sanded it with a little bit of sandpaper and then cleaned it with some rubbing alcohol. And now it's ready to install. And I found that applying about 3 inches of glue and then hitting it with some kicker and then moving along and doing 3 more inches was just about right for this. There's lots of different methods, but this one worked really well for me. Next up, we'll dry fit our aileron stiffener. Looks like I have to trim it a little, and then I'll glue it into place. Also, off camera, I do have a big fan that's moving just a little bit of air through there, so that way it's well ventilated. Because I am using so much CA and kicker, I want to really make sure that I keep the air moving. I get both those aileron stiffeners in, and then I just want to make sure that everything is drying nice and flat, so I put some weight on them to keep it from warping while it dries. I turn this over to see how much CA has bled through, and you see me wiping it up here, really trying to keep my workspace clean because the CA will migrate and then it'll stick to parts that it shouldn't. So now we head to the parts bag for our aileron control horns. They're going to be the bigger of the 2 sets of horns. And then we also need these lateral stiffeners. I dry fit those, trim them to size. Everything looks like it fits in there real nice. And then we can glue it all into place. Okay, those look good. Now we're ready to move on to our rear wing spar. I dry fit it, I trim it, I glue it in place. Then I pull all these little tabs out, I wipe down my workspace, and then we're going to be ready to give a dry fit to our side force generators and our aileron standoffs for our bracing. Those fit well, so I'm going to give it some foam tack and press them in. And we'll do that on both wings. Again, I clean up my workspace because I don't want any of that getting on the back of it, smudging my graphics. Next up is going to be cutting our aileron bracing. So we're going to grab our carbon fiber pieces. I measure out 140 millimeters for these first two, and I was working off of an early version of the manual which had some incorrect numbers. So these are going to be 155 for a couple of them, and then 160 for the two outer ones on each side. So I cut all mine at once, ended up they were all a little short, so I had to recut them. Not a big deal. I was able to use those later on, so it didn't really matter too much for me. But we get all these cut and then we glue them into place. Make sure that you have it weighed down while you're doing it. I've got my little pieces of angle iron holding everything flat. Now we're ready to glue on the front of the plane, and we just want this part that goes a little further down on the left side because we're looking at the bottom of the plane, so that will make sure that we get the correct thrust angle. And for the horizontal fuselage, the bottom has these channels down the sides. And again, we dry fit that and glue it in. And then we can work on the horizontal stabilizer and elevator. I make sure to measure because I don't want this to be off. Let it dry, and then we're ready to put on these horizontal bracings that go along the fuselage. We trim them to length and glue them in place. Next comes the elevator stiffener, which just needed a little trim. Now we can remove the sprues from the horizontal fuselage. We can grab the lower part of the vertical fuselage and give it a dry fit. That all looks great. Now I'm going to use some foam tack and go all the way down. Then we can squeeze all of our tabs into place and get it securely fastened. Next up, we're going to work on the wing struts. And I found that working them all the way through and then trimming them off was the best way to go. Also, you'll see me here making sure everything is at 90 degrees before I glue it into place. Once those wing struts are all done, now we're ready to start with the bracing along each side of the fuselage. You'll see here that I'm measuring and then I'm doing some dry fitting, making sure everything's at 90 degrees, and then gluing with CA. This is always a part of the build that I'm nervous about starting, but every time I do it and get to the end, I realize it's really not that big of a deal to work with the bracing. Just make sure that you're going off of the manual and keeping track of the sizes as you cut them. Okay, it looks like we're all done with aileron bracing. I'll check it one more time for everything to be square, and then we're ready to head on to the landing gear. I go to the parts bag and find these 4 circles. The smaller ones go on the wheel pants, the larger ones go on the lower part of the vertical fuselage to reinforce. Once those are glued in place, I can put my carbon fiber landing gear through. I didn't have a place to put those in particular, so I just eyeballed it. Next up, we'll be installing our servos, but first I need to set up my radio, so I'm going to bind my receiver, calibrate my ESC, verify motor direction, and center all my servos. There's a detailed video on this in the description, so you can check that out if you want to see more. Next, we're ready to install our servos. Our aileron servo went in with no problem, but our elevator servo, mine needed to have the tabs trimmed off of it. Yours may not, but I just trimmed those tabs off and it went in really easy. Make sure to put your servo leads to whatever side you're going to have your receiver on, and then we can glue them into place. Then we glue our rudder onto the top half of the vertical fuselage. And you'll notice I got a little excited and skipped a step here. I did not do a dry fit at this point. You really need to do a dry fit to make sure everything is fitting over those servos like you expect. And then you can glue on the top half of the vertical fuselage. And we really want to work everything together so it's nice and flush with the horizontal fuselage. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue the bottom half of the rudder. And now we install the stiffener that goes all the way through the vertical fuselage. Now we install the bracing that goes from the horizontal stabilizer up to the vertical stabilizer, and there wasn't a hole there on the horizontal stabilizer, so I had to just poke that into place. Next up, we're going to add our differential horn to our aileron servo, and then we'll start creating our push rods. Although it's probably not necessary at all, I do wrap these with a little bit of thread. This isn't included in the kit, but I like to do it. And in case you're wondering, there are no servo extensions needed on the rudder or elevator. I'm using this little piece of wood that has an indentation and a hole in it to press the adjustable end link into the clip that holds it from the backside. It is much easier to do this before it gets mounted on the plane. For these push rods, I made a bit of a mistake because when I cut my heat shrink here, I didn't cut them short enough. They really need to be just a little bit shorter than the press-in link, so that way CA can wick along the length of it. So make sure those are short enough, and then we put those together. Add a little bit of heat. And then we're going to use CA to give them a final bond. Then we can install our aileron push rods, and when we're doing this, we really need to make sure that those are square before you try to press them into place, otherwise you can fold over the ears on the press-in links. We trim off the excess CA and give it a little drop of glue. And here we're putting the adjustable end links onto the servo horns for the elevator and rudder. And don't worry, there is no extension necessary on these. Next up, I cut out and thread on all my pushrod guides. And then we're going to glue on our motor mount. Then we will cut apart and mount the pants to the landing gear. And then we can mount the motor, the ESC, and the receiver. Then I can plug in all my servos and tidy up all my wires. Then we can glue in the stiffener and rudder control horn. then our elevator control horn, and then our elevator pushrod. And we're going with a little drop of CA on each of the pushrod guides. Just make sure you don't get any of this on the pushrod itself. Then we can flip it around and install our rudder pushrod. I mark a couple locations on the fuselage, 240 millimeters back from the motor mount for my center of gravity. Then I balance my prop, which didn't take much balancing at all. Install the prop, and then I can double check for battery placement so I can get my Velcro in the correct spot. Okay, for this maiden flight, I am using a 2S 5500 milliamp hour battery, and it is flying great. I had all the surfaces zeroed, so I didn't have to do any trimming on it, and it's feeling really balanced. I think I got the CG pretty well set. I might adjust it a little bit as time goes on. So I'm really looking for how it reacts and the way that, like, how much do you get when you push the elevator over? How does it do on recovering from something like this spin? And how much the ailerons are really twisting the plane as you apply your throttle. So just getting used to the model in general. It flies nice slow, it flies nice fast. The one thing I have found from this is it really does not like crashing. Every time I crashed it, I was doing some good repairs. There was never just an easy, oh yeah, it just went down and I can toss it again. So make sure you're keeping it off the ground, as I probably should do a little more. There's a little falling leaf. I was wondering if the elevator and rudder would have enough throw since they don't have extensions on the servo horns, but it turns out that they're perfect without extensions. And here you see me playing around with a knife edge loop. She does really well. With knife edge and Harrier, it's really balanced. There's no bad tendencies, not a lot of excessive wing rocking or anything like that. Very smooth, very predictable, no coupling. It is everything that I would want it to be. And after a couple waterfalls, I go into a very sloppy rolling Harrier. I've been working on my rolling Harrier since I started flying 3D, and it still eludes me. Someday I'll get there. I think I just need more sim practice. Next, I give it a tail slide into a reverse loop. I don't know how I pulled that off. That was really fun. Sometimes it just does exactly what I'm trying to get it to do. Other times, like this, I was trying to do a bit of a knife edge spin. I'm not quite there with this. Give it a few more flights on this model and then I'll have it down, no problem. Sometimes they take a little power going down, a little aileron into it, but other times it's just a little hard to get. And just in case you're wondering, I do like the flexi foam that they're using for these models. I think we'll probably see more of these in the future from RC Factory. The foam feels a little bit brittle in that it's not rubbery like the EPP is, but it still glues together really nice with foam tack for repairs. So I'm liking it. I think the graphics look great. It's really interesting to work with. And here I'm just playing around with it. I'm going to bring it down for a little tail touch. I power out and then bring it back down with a spin. And that's going to be it for the build video and maiden flight of the Giles 202. I would definitely recommend checking out some of the factory pilots that can really put this thing to good use. It just embarrasses me with my flying, so some people out there are absolutely incredible. So check them out. And just a side note, I always hand launch and hand catch my models, but please don't do it unless you are fully confident in your skills. I don't want anybody getting hurt.